So what on earth has this election been all about? Less than a week before Israelis go to the polls in one of the most important path-setting elections in their history, it's a question often posed by foreign correspondents and diplomats stationed here, people whose business it is to understand the meaning behind the election. So what in heaven's name has it been about? Well, let me try to answer, slightly tongue-in-cheek, with an anecdote relating to the great Dr. Samuel Johnson, the first great lexicographer of English. In 1755, he published his famous dictionary, the first full compilation of words in the English language. Now, Dr. Johnson was a great stickler, and he was adamant that his dictionary would contain none of what he called rude words. The story goes that a couple of esteemed society ladies accosted the good doctor with the query, "Why the omission?" Johnson's answer, "Aha, my dears, I see you have been searching for them." Perhaps they have been searching, and perhaps that's what's been missing for these good folk whose business it is to understand the key words of this election. Not rude words, heaven forbid, but words like peace and conflict, the idea of how far the result of the election will promote the so-called peace process, or conversely, how far it might presage Israelis and Palestinians slipping back into open conflict. This past week I was away in Europe and thus had to follow events unfolding back here in Israel vicariously through how it was covered by the international media. Interestingly, other than in the New York Times, there seemed to be nary a word on the elections, though they are, I believe, of critical importance in shaping the unfolding of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, something which is, of course, of great interest to the international community. Then came the Israeli action against the Palestinian prison in Jericho, where PFLP leader Ahmad Sadat had been held for his responsibility in the killing of a right-wing Israeli minister in 2001. The action was triggered by substantiated reports that one of Hamas's first political goals would be to work for the release of Sadat, an elected member of the new Palestinian Council. The merits of this Israeli action can certainly be debated. The legitimacy of the action may even be debated, even whether acting Prime Minister Ehud Olmert was in fact motivated, as some abroad, and some indeed at home, believe, by the desire to show himself tough in advance of the elections and to impress potential coalition partners who are looking for an uncompromising policy vis-à-vis Hamas. But what was the prime focus of analysis abroad? How far the Jericho action might affect the peace process, as one eminent interviewee put it on the BBC in response to a question, what do the Palestinians do now that Israel is unwilling to engage them in negotiating process? Though to be fair, the same esteemed analyst added that the Israeli position has gained some justification following Hamas's elevation to power. It was the conclusion that was really troubling. The idea that as a result of this fresh confrontation, the prime duty of the international community is to, as it was put, to resuscitate the negotiating process immediately, to do everything to draw the two parties together again. On the one hand, to go on insisting that Hamas drop its refusal to negotiate with Israel, and likewise to insist that Israel not take any action which could jeopardize the prospect of negotiations with any legitimate partner on the Palestinian side. How narrow a vision, as if the magical phrase of the peace process was not magic at all, but that it is blinding most in the international community to the fundamental state of relations now between Israelis and Palestinians. For what is really happening is that the two peoples are turning their backs on one another. That is the reality which the international community needs to acknowledge and to address. If elected, Ehud Olmert insists that his government won't sit idly by waiting for the Palestinians. This is what he had to say. If we reach the conclusion after a reasonable amount of time that the Palestinians do not intend to change course, and this will not be measured in years, said Olmert, Israel will not be their hostage. We are not prepared to wait without limit for this authority to decide when it wants to swing us from terror to negotiations and vice versa. We experienced all this during the past 15 years, and we've gained not a single thing from it. Ehud Olmert. Now listen to what Dr. Mahmoud al-Zahar, the prospective Hamas foreign minister, had to say. Negotiation is not a goal in itself. It is a method. Negotiating with Israel is not haram, prohibited under Islam. It is not a capital crime. The political crime is when we sit with the Israelis and then tell the Palestinian people that there is progress, when in fact there is not. The Palestinian Authority negotiated with them for many, many years and reached a deadlock. So why should we be a new copy of that? It's just a waste of time. Dr. Zahal. With mutual recognition as negotiating partners, not even in the wildest stretch of the imagination in the diplomatic cards, each side, Israelis and Palestinians, are simply turning inward, promising to negotiate a domestic agenda through national dialogue. In short, each side intending to mind its own national business. Pledging that in 4 years' time Israel will be disengaged from the Palestinian population within new borders along the route of the security wall fence is what Ehud Olmert had to say. And he stressed that these self-defined borders will be set on, as he put it, a line that we will agree upon. And on that, first of all, it is necessary to hold negotiations with ourselves. Zahar's riposte to this Israeli disengagement? Hamas-style disengagement. We have to disengage economically, on security, everything. The first option is that we have to go away from Israel. We have to open the doors to the Arab and Muslim countries, said Dr. Zahar. It is this that the international community ought to be taking notice of, that both peoples are on the brink of deliberately making that similar and opposite choice for separation. It is separation and disengagement, not peace and conflict, that are the key words which will be etched further into the reality by this Israeli election next week, just as they have been earlier by the Palestinian elections. Surely to understand that is a healthier way of trying to help Israelis and Palestinians find a way to exist alongside one another for the next some years. Much better, it would seem, than to go on fruitlessly demanding that they continue to head down the inevitable cul-de-sac of the international roadmap for peace.